CGB, welcome back once again. You're back and a glutton for punishment. I thought after last episode, buddy, I thought we were going to end the series here because the last episode, I think you left completely a shattered man. Would you not agree?
No. You know what? I don't agree. And I am going to practice the art of absolutely pretending that never happened.
Okay.
I don't think anybody watched it. I'm pretty sure nobody would watch it. Why would they? There's nothing to see there. Nothing
Nothing at all. But today...
I specifically told my followers on Twitter and YouTube to never watch that video. So I'm pretty sure that not a single
soul watched that video because the commenters, they listen to our instructions in our dictatorships that we've created on our channels here. Yeah, when we say don't watch it, they will never ever watch it. That's unthinkable. It would, if they did such a thing, they would be punished immensely. But
they don't call us influencers because they don't listen to us. Okay,
precisely.
That's what being an influencer is. You say it, they do it every time.
So one thing that I picked up on from our previous episode is that you found it very fascinating that in Yu-Gi-Oh! We have a lot of turn zero interaction. Cards that can just be played even during the opponent's turn on the very first turn of the game. I'm familiar that in Magic the Gathering, you have some cards that can also do that as well. Cards such as Force of Will, for example, just things like that. We have a million different Force of Wills at our disposal because remember in Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything's free. So I thought it would be fun to pick up, we call them colloquially called hand traps. The reason for that is because although they are not necessarily trap cards by their name, they are cards that can be used at quick effect or instant speed during your opponent's turn to disrupt them, similar to how a trap card would. So I'm going to be showing you some hand traps, and I'm going to let you know none of these hand traps have ever been banned, but some of them have made their way on the limited list. So your goal today is to see if you think the card is good, but also if you think the card has ever served any time on the limited list. Sound good?
It sounds familiar, but I can't recall a single time I've done a video like this.
Not at all.
Let's see what happens.
Let's start with the first one to make it easy for you. For those watching, we're going to be going in chronological order here. So we're going to start with some of the simple ones.
DD Crow. I'm sorry, this is a very small monster. I'm confused already. This is a level 1, 100 attack, 100 defense.
Why don't you read the effect? That'll give you some insight.
I didn't know they made them this small. Winged Beast effect. Quick effect, you can discard this card to the graveyard. Then target one card in your opponent's graveyard to banish that target. Oh, just any time?
Yeah.
You can just discard this anytime to banish one card from a graveyard?
From your opponent specifically, but yes.
Okay.
What's going through your mind?
If they try to... So, yeah, it doesn't even have to be on the first turn. It's you probably never play this as the creature, like, ever.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So if they try to use any graveyard thingy-majiggy, this is like, I will... discard this, get rid of that one thing, and then they can't do the thingy they were trying to do.
Surely Magic has an analog to this, surely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the weird thing about in Magic is I'm looking at this card, and I'm like, okay, I can see why that's useful, because graveyards do stuff. In Magic, there are many analogs to a card like this. Okay. Even some of them are free.
Ooh, okay. That's something I don't hear very often in Magic. Interesting.
Yeah. In a way, that there's one that's free. And... the cards, like, have roles, but the weird thing is, all of them do more than this. This is nothing but drop a card to banish card from graveyard. All of the cards I'm thinking of in Magic are banish card from graveyard, draw a card. Banish card from graveyard, and also banish all other copies of that card from from hand and graveyard, you know? Or banish card, gain 3 life. Like, they all have more. They all come with more. This card would be okay, but not good, and in eternal formats would be pushed out by other cards that are perfectly fine and healthy and encouraged in the format. So this would not see magical play, I don't think, at all.
Interesting. Okay.
And yeah. And you would play the cards that do more. You would want it to replace itself. You would want more on top of your card. So I think the only way that this is a banned, restricted, or even busted card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is if this is like the only way to get this effect.
Well, remember, I told you, none of them have been banned. So your choice is between, was it ever restricted or is it not restricted ever? So no banned. So it's 50-50 on your guess.
I feel like you should let me call something banned anyway.
If you want to, I mean, you can. I mean, if you want to just actively get it wrong, be my guest.
Ban it! No, okay. There's no way this bird got restricted. I don't think so. I think that you already mentioned that there's a lot of these quick effects. A lot of them. And there's got to be one that does this, but better. So I'm going to say no. This card probably, I mean, if it sees play, it's only because there aren't many options for this effect.
Sure. And you think it's bad by with what you're analyzing it based off, like Magic analogs and such?
Compared to the cards in Magic, this is bad. In Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't have the context of how many options you have, but if there are any other options that give you something on top of this, I would say bad.
DD Crow, this might shock you. So this was one of the very first hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh. There was a few that predated this, but I will say for the most part, those were, they were not particularly good, let's say. So this is not the first time there was a discard this card to do something. But this was the first one that was probably the most useful. This card is quite old. I want to say this card was printed in 2006, 2005. So 4 years into Yu-Gi-Oh's lifespan, approximately. And this might shock you. This card still sees play today. So when you were talking about in Magic how there's like a card that does this and then draws a card or does something else, by Yu-Gi-Oh standards, that would be crazy. Now, there are other cards that go after the graveyard. I'm not saying DD Crow is exclusively the only card that does this, but for what it's worth, this is like maybe one of the best cards at hitting the graveyard specifically because it does in fact banish the card. I don't believe there are many other cards that are similar to Crow in this way. And again, because you are allowed to do this on your opponent's turn one, depending on the type of deck that they're playing, you know that the graveyard's a second hand. DD Crow can actually be an asshole in a lot of instances. So it hasn't been played ever since its release. But it's a card that will go in and out of formats depending on if it makes sense to play it. But you are correct. It was never limited at all. Just a perfectly fair Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's a -1 in terms of card economy, but it can actually be a very strong play stopper in a lot of instances. So by Yu-Gi-Oh standards, Crow is very good. So that'll set the tone for the rest of this video.
That's kind of wild that this... Yeah, okay. The number of cards I want to show you now from Magic that mess with graveyards, you have no idea. Holy crap.
If DD Crow said banish an opponent's card, draw a card, that would be like probably a 3 of in every Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Like just because it cycled itself. That would be nuts. That would be so good. All right, here's your next one.
Oh, yeah. Honest. Oh, good. This card is me.
I was going to say it's me because I would never deceive you. I would never deceive you.
I play honest Magic, nothing broken, nothing weird. Okay, I need a bigger version of this to read it. Oh god, I do look like this person. My legs in particular have this many muscles, I am sure. So let's see. Attack is 1100, defense is 1900. This is level 4 fairy effect. During your main phase, you can return this card from the field to the hand. Okay. During either player's damage step, when a light monster you control battles, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. That monster gains attack equal to the attack of the opponent's monster it was battling. Okay. What the hell is this? All right, we go again. You can return this card from field to hand. I'm guessing that's just bonusy stuff. If you want to put this out, then punch with it, then you bring it back. And then during other damage step, probably when it has to be a light monster. You can discard this. You gain attack equal to the opponent's monster. So you win the fight, right?
Correct.
Probably.
You will. Yeah. Most of the time, if not always, win the fight. Yes. Yes.
Is Yu-Gi-Oh the game where everything has trample, where the attack goes over to the opponent?
Yes. If the monsters are in attack position. Defense position, if they have piercing, then it is basically trample, but yes. So for instance, I'll give you an example here. If my 100 attack DD Crow, well, that's not a light monster, so probably a bad example, but let's say DD Crow was light. If my 100 attack light DD Crow attacked your 3000 attack Blue Eyes White Dragon, if I drop Honest, that DD Crow gains 3000 attack to 3100 attack and kills your Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Lore-wise, how does that work? How does Honest, this fairy, be like, yo, That crow is now bigger than that dragon. Ta-da! How does that work? It doesn't work. Whatever. This card is weird, dude. It's so weird.
Cool, huh?
I guess.
You don't seem convinced.
I don't know. It's combat tricks. I hate those.
Okay.
They require creatures. I hate those too.
Okay.
I guess it's hard to see. I mean, the example you gave is awesome, and I imagine that like really does light up people's imaginations, right? It sounds really great, but it does mean that you're attacking with a smaller creature, and why not just run bigger creatures?
Okay.
Huh?
Okay.
So the other thing that's interesting about it is the light monster like type, and granted limited exposure, but in other videos when something is restricted to something other than dark monsters, it hasn't been as good as I thought it was.
Okay.
So the light monster immediately has me like setting off like, okay, type needs specific type, might not be as good as you think it is, but this is a pretty cool combat trick that I don't think can be duplicated well in Magic, because you can play this, you can punch your opponent or something, then you can return this, if I'm understanding things correctly, and then do when the opponent's thing attacks you, now they have to think about, they know you have it, right? So they have to like, oh no, what about this and what about that? But if they don't play into it on your turn, you just do it again. You know, it probably makes combat a nightmare.
Yep.
And is that
that is true. That is true.
So if combat is a nightmare, is that bad enough? It sounds like combat's a part of a majority of games, but I've seen a lot of cards that make combat a nightmare that aren't busted. They're just like, you work harder. Embercleave comes to mind. Wandering Emperor comes to mind in Magic as cards that make combat a nightmare, but were never the problem. So I don't know. I think that you want your combat to be more than just straightforward punchies and kickies. You want tricks. But here's the problem. I haven't seen many tricks. This might be the worst trick. You might be showing me the worstest trick. And that's probably what it takes to get into a video like this. You're not going to show me a fine trick. You're going to show me the nastiest.
Yeah, I would never show you a fine trick. No, I would never do that.
Did this card get restricted? You're probably going to tell me yes. I don't see it, so I'm playing the meta game. I'm trying to figure out if you're gonna show me two fine cards right in a row up front. And you know what? I think you think that the last video would get in my head. Well, it doesn't. I am mentally resilient. My fortitude is amazing, and my brain acts like that of a goldfish. There was no last video. So nah, this card's fine. This card wasn't restricted. This card's fine.
Final answer?
Yeah.
It was restricted.
Yeah, okay.
So let me give you some context here. Once again, I am going chronologically, so these are some of the older cards. Honest was released in a set called Light of Destruction, fittingly enough, which provided a lot of light-focused support for the game. You did mention how typically in the videos you've learned dark is the best supported attribute, and that is the case, yes. But light is probably second in line, to be honest. And, haha, I did not mean to say that. When it comes to honest specifically, there have been several light-based archetypes that throughout history have had... This is like similar to the color pie in Magic, I want to say, where this is a reason to play light-focused decks. And it took Yu-Gi-Oh! A bit of time to get to the point of like starting to separate, you know, things by like tribal and like, you know, type or attribute, things like that, to give payoffs, to get people away from playing just the best good stuff deck that they can. And so this was a payoff for playing light. And Honest is a menace. Anytime you would go up against a light deck in old school Yu-Gi-Oh, there was always that lingering fear of, fuck, if I just attack and they have Honest, I lose the game. It's basically removal, right? And it's very unique removal because it's on a body, and you can use the body, you know, like you said, you could summon it, poke, put it back to hand. Now your opponent knows you have it, so now they're like, how do I actually deal with this card, right? It's obviously the surprise factor is good if they don't know you have it, but... man, this card is a menace. By Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards today, this card is unplayable. It's just way too slow. But in old Yu-Gi-Oh!, this card was an absolute beast. And people to this day are still scarred by the impact that this card had in the game. That unknown information, you gotta love it. But Honest is great. People love it.
How long was it restricted?
A few years, actually. It took some time, and then eventually the format in Yu-Gi-Oh! The game just sped up so much that it really just didn't matter. Like a combat trick like this was just too situational, and also during the time, light kind of fell out of favor as being like a dominant attribute, let's say. So it's been unrestricted for like probably a decade at this point. It was very early on.
Sounds about right. Makes sense. Okay.
All right, next up. Speaking of dark monsters.
Battle Fader is a level... This has 0 attack and 0 defense.
It'll make sense.
Gives?
Read the card.
What gives?
Read the card.
Okay. It's a fiend. When an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, then end the battle phase. If summoned this way, banish it when it leaves the field. Banish it when it leaves the field. Okay, they're just saying when gone, no comebacks. When an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. End the battle phase. So it's a fog. In Magic, that's what we call a fog. You just no battle this turn. But for free, no battle. Okay.
And you get to special summon the Battle Fader on top of it.
I guess. How would this even matter? Because it's a 0.
You tell us.
When an opponent declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card. Then end the phase. Summon this way, banish it. I mean, I guess you have something to tribute summon?
Okay, you're putting it together.
Yeah, you got a body. You got just a wimpy body, I guess. Okay. Yeah, okay. Something. All right, it's better than nothing. I guess then it's not a direct analog to like a magic card, but in magic cards that just like negate a combat phase are in many cases not what you want. They're not very good either. How important is that in Yu-Gi-Oh? Because I feel like in Yu-Gi-Oh, extra turns, like the pace of the game is probably really fast, given that things are free and attack the turn they come down. So getting an extra turn is a huge swing, right? So like, yeah, I mean, you're a turn behind. The opponent's about to murder you. You get an extra turn, you beat them. Like swinging the race is probably huge. And I guess in my mind, in that world, it's way better than in Magic. In that case, are three of these being legal? It's a dark monster. We know that that's the popular type. Are 3 of these in every deck forever in an eternal format? Fine. This card would have to be legitimate bad. It doesn't seem bad. It seems closer to Time Walk, which in Magic is busted. It seems closer like getting an extra turn, because it seems like most of the win cons in Yu-Gi-Oh, except for brief periods of time and some of the things that you've shown me, are punching face. And some of the things that you showed me that are like burning the opponent's face were banned. None of these were banned though. So the question is, the first question is it actually good? It seems good. It seems better than a fog effect in Magic. The second question is restricted. Did they tolerate 3 of these in every dark deck for a long time? Because if we're saying it's good, it would get played. I imagine that this is a card, when legal as a 3 of, is much worse than legal as a 1 of.
Okay.
Because you can do it again and again and again. And if your opponent just drew 3 battle faders, oh God, what a disgustingly horrible story. What if you both drew 3 battle faders? I battle fade, 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 I battle fade. Dude, this is the world that they might have lived in. If we're saying the card is good, and if I'm right about that, I'm not sure I am, but feel like I am. So I'm going to say this card got restricted. I think this is a card where a restriction makes sense, because if like you can negate 1 combat and then counter swing and win, in a way it's like had it, planned for it, put it in my deck, played to it, made it happen. And on the other hand, if you're like, oh well, drew 3 of them, just make opponent miserable and sit there the whole time, hell on earth, absolute hell on earth. So I'm gonna say Battle Fader is a restricted card.
Final answer.
Yep, that's it.
This card's fine. This card was never restricted. So
really,
yeah. So Battle Fader is a perfectly fine card. It actually, you got it where that was the main application of this card. Again, somewhat older card, but it has seen some play in somewhat modern Yu-Gi-Oh, but very rarely. I would say it is just a bit slow, all things considered. The best application for this is especially when tribute summoning was still prominent. There's an archetype of monsters called Monarchs. The Monarchs are known for tribute summons, and when you tribute summon them, they have very powerful effects. And Battle Fader slotted its way into these types of decks because not only does it buy you an extra turn if you're, on the back back foot, but it also gives you a monster that on your next turn, you now contribute some of that monster for one of your monarchs for one of those big payoffs. So that's where Battle Fader initially found its home. And this isn't a bad card by any means, don't get me wrong. It's a generally like okay to good card. It's very just situational on like the way the format is, the way the decks are. But if for the most part, it's just kind of a card that you would rather have something that's like really going to stop your opponent versus this, because if you don't have something to convert Battle Fader into, like a Tribute Summon, for instance, Battle Fader loses a lot of its value very quickly, because otherwise it's just this doofus that's just on the field not doing anything. And that's kind of one of the problems with it. And also, you'd rather just have more proactive cards, because it does have to be a direct attack. So an attack on a monster, you could not Battle Fader. But once they attack you directly, then you can. So it's kind of a clunky card. A lot of like burn and stall decks with like alt win conditions would play Battle Fader, because the more time they get, the more likely they are to get to their alternate win condition. But just like an okay card. Kind of annoying when you see it, but it's not like, oh, this is game breaking or anything like that.
Fair.
All right.
I should have stuck to the magic, like,
you should have. As soon as you started going down it, I was giggling. Like, oh my god. I was like, he's gonna think it's restricted.
It felt like stopping the combat would be way better in a faster tempo game, but yeah, it's still
I don't want to say
down
it isn't,
a card kind
but
of.
it's contextual.
It's a bad.
Yeah. It's contextual.
It's kind of a weak critter.
I'm gonna warn you, this has a lot of text, but this is gonna be a fun one.
No, do we have to? Can I just not read it and just flip a coin? Gorz, the Emissary of Darkness, level 7 dark monster, attack 2700, defense 2500, fiend effect. Oh god.
You can do it. I believe in you.
When you take damage from a card your opponent controls, you can special summon this card from your hand. You must control no cards to activate and to resolve this effect. When special summoned this way, activate the appropriate effect based on the type of damage. If it's battle damage, special summon one Emissary of Darkness token, fairy type, light, level 7, attack ? Defense ? Its attack and defense are each equal to the amount of battle damage you took. Effect damage, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the amount of damage you took.
That makes sense?
Totally.
You're such a liar.
Oh no, I've got this so much. I've got this. This card is trash.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just seeing if I can get a reaction. All right.
I can't give you a reaction because then that gives away the answer potentially.
If I could make you laugh, it'd be fun. The weird thing I have about this card is you're not taking battle damage on turn 1, which is the time when you'd have nothing. So that's weird. If you have to control nothing, that's my understanding.
You can have cards in hand, you just can't have anything on your field.
Nothing. I'm wondering, like, so there's context I just don't have of like, is a control deck in this game the type of thing to have nothing most of the time? Or it seems to me like they have to put out trap cards and spell cards. It seems like having nothing is not a real option.
Control decks in this game typically have lots of spells and traps that might be continuous spells or traps that are active on the field to like stop the opponent from doing certain things. Or typically control decks are just very trap card heavy, let's say generally speaking.
It's tough to understand like how often when you end a turn, how much stuff is on your opponent's board.
Okay.
Is this the type of game where at the end of the typical battle phase and turn, have you cleared up everything your opponent has to try to like maintain being ahead? And then on their turn, the parry is now they clean up everything you have. By the end of their turn, like, and their attacks and their plays, you have nothing and they have 1 or 2 monsters left over. And then on your turn, you're supposed to return the favor. And the person who blinks first and passes and the opponent has something still on their board is the person who's behind. Like, is that a game of Yu-Gi-Oh? Because that's how some games of Magic break down. That's how some games of Hearthstone that I've experienced, tend to go, right?
Sure.
You just want to leave them with nothing every turn.
Sure. I mean, I think that might just be typical card game 101 anyway. Yeah, but like it just really depends. Like I would say for the most part, especially, from this era that we're talking about, having like maybe 1 or 2 monsters on the board and like maybe, a back row or 2 if it's a, a spell or trap that they can deploy. That wouldn't be uncommon. You might try to like clean up their monsters and they might still have, their back row that you have to contend with. It really just kind of depends on the way things are, because they might hold their cards until they have like a game shot and then they go all out. Like, so there's a lot of, it's kind of hard to give you like a straight answer on that. Exactly.
This is a card. It feels exciting, but and for everybody who's had like that bad beat story of the time they got killed on turn 1 by a combo, or if there is some combo in the meta that like say destroys your whole board, like maybe a board wipe, maybe a strategy is to like wipe everything off the board and pass, and then the opponent goes bam 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 smash you, and you're like you didn't see my hand trap. I don't know. So like, but those things do feel situational. They feel good when you set them up, but they're definitely dependent on meta and other cards. And like, how do you run this just generically in your deck unless you're really trying to set that up all the time? So that's what I can see. I can see maybe there was an annoying deck that existed that's whole plan was blow up everything and have this card in hand. That's kind of what comes to mind. And then when turn 1 combo is a thing in the meta, like some kind of just blast you in the face combo is meta, or you try to pop off on turn 1 and just deal 8,000 damage outside of combat. You know, this card looks brilliant. I feel like I'm looking at a card, rang a lot of bells for excitement, but was too situational and is clunky on its own. Like, its numbers aren't bad, but it doesn't feel like you would ever run this if you're not getting it with the effect. So was it, and then I have to answer, was it ever restricted? I don't think so. I think this is fighting the good fight. I think this card, like if this card is the thing that's happening, I think that's all right in the situation that we're stopping combo like on turn 1 or 2. In the situation where you're playing oops all board wipes and then using this when your opponent tries to pop off and get you, that's very frustrating, and maybe it got restricted for that deck. I would love that deck, but I have no evidence that deck is real, but I'd try to build it. I think this card is too situational. I'm going to say this card was not restricted.
Final answer?
Yeah, that's it.
You're right. This card's not restricted.
Woo!
After it was restricted for terrorizing the entire time it was at 3 when it was first released.
Really?
Yeah, Gorz basically defined the format around the era that it was released. So let me give you some
What the hell were people doing?
So let me give you context here. So basically, when Gorz was around, this card, similar to Honest, like really striked fear into people when they had an empty board. Because let's say there's a situation where like maybe you play like 1 or 2 guys, maybe you set a back row, right? Your opponent then on their turn does something to pop both of your guys, you know, in battle or something. Maybe you try to use your trap card to stop them, but they have something to stop. And now all of a sudden your opponent has a couple monsters on the field, but you don't have any cards on your field because you've traded all your resources and they've destroyed all your stuff. They attack you directly, and then down comes Gorz. This card single-handedly can turn an entire game around and win you the game if it resolves. That's how powerful this card is. It's insane. People to this day are still afraid of, like, the 0.1% chance that the opponent might have it, that it's actually influenced the attack order that people do. People will attack from lowest to highest because typically people will drop the Gorz on the highest attack monster because they want the biggest token out of everything. So psychologically, it's done a lot of damage, like through attacking in the battle phase altogether. You might just have to like play in like a retro format, like the Edison format, to understand like how good this card is. During this time, for context, the only board wipe that exists in Yu-Gi-Oh! There are 2. There's one that is a trap card that actually Gorz plays around because of when it special summons itself. They can't even use that card specifically. And the other board wipe is when your opponent declares an attack, you flip it up and destroy all monsters that are in attack position that they control. So if your opponent has already dealt with those cards previously in the game or has ways to deal with those cards in the future and plays around it, getting a 2,700 attack monster plus an extra, who knows, like 2,000 attack to 3,000 attack token in addition to that is massive. This card is so good that it was restricted for a very long period of time. And I remember when it came off the ban list, people were like, there's no way this card's coming off the ban or the restricted list rather, just because of like, that's how like psychologically damaging this card was for a lot of people. By nowadays standards, this card's unplayable. It's way too slow. But this card is insane. If you saw it in context, I think it might make more sense, but this card is nuts. It's so good.
I am stunned. I am stunned. It's just empty board all the time.
Yeah,
okay.
And you can even, like, on the first turn of the game, you could just pass like you do nothing, like you say how in Magic control decks play. And your opponent immediately, the alarm bells are going to sound off. Like, okay, if they're just passing, there's no way that they are passing if they don't have Gorz, but you could bluff that, and your opponent's going to play differently as a result of that. That is, like, how big the shadow looms over this game with Gorz.
That.
It's great. No,
Isn't
it's
that
awesome.
fun?
It is fun. It is fun. But yeah, Gorz is a menace. This card is insane. It's so good.
Why restrict that? That's good gameplay right there. That's adding some poker to your
just
Yu-Gi-Oh.
one alone was enough to turn a game. I wouldn't want to deal with multiple Gorz.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Let's go.
It's crazy. It's
okay.
crazy. I'll have to show you that one day. But anyway, let's move on. We've got ground to cover here.
Dude, look at this. This is such an anime boy right here. Or girl? Honestly, I'm lost.
Honestly,
who knows?
The audience also has still never figured it out, to be honest with you.
Effect Veiler. Yeah, light critter with no stats, 0 stats, is a tuner. We've talked about tuners. I don't remember, but we'll get to it. Okay. During your opponent's main phase, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, then target one effect monster your opponent controls and negate the effects of that face-up monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. Discard this. Opponent's monster's effects don't do anything. You're showing me some really good monster effects, but that's usually because the card got banned. If this card were good, why would we have to ban those things?
Okay, fair point.
So, yeah. So, it's weird to see this at this stage. This card, we were going in order. I guess I'm guessing we're still like kind of in mid Yu-Gi-Oh. When did this card come out?
Yeah, mid Yu-Gi-Oh. I think this was 2011, I want to say, when this card came out.
Yeah, if this card were good, I feel like a lot of the cards you show me that have been banned so far wouldn't need to be banned. So we've got some peaks behind the curtain. But what if this card got restricted? And that's why they can't lean on it to keep the banned things from happening. Still, all right. I mean, this is a dork. And it's not even like you don't even get it for the tribute summon or the extra value, right? You're just toss it in the graveyard to negate one monster's effect. You would want a card that could, like, we have a number of ways to counter any spell so that they don't also get the monster. They still get the stats of the monster here.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. The monster stays on the field.
And the effect is just negated until end of turn. If it's an ongoing effect, it takes effect if it sticks around, so you still have to kill it. You still have to deal with it. And, you know, I can think of a few cards in Magic that kind of have an effect like this that you play from time to time. They see situational play, but they're not busted, only until end of turn. So, you know, you've shown me a lot of great effects, but if this card were good, I just don't think those effects would be scary. If the answer was you just play Effect Veiler, and then you don't have to worry about it, then people would play Effect Veiler. I don't know. It's one of those, again, we're meta a little, but my first thought is narrow doesn't like give you a lot back. If it drew a card, it would be busted in Yu-Gi-Oh. You've kind of shared that, but still, like, this is just, I think this card is fine, but it, again, if you just have it in your hand and your opponent is bashing your face with stats, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you. So I'm gonna say this card's fine.
And by consequence of that, not restricted.
Yeah.
God, Effect Veiler's crazy. You are on another level, man. Effect Veiler. Let's talk about Effect Veiler. So, Effect Veiler still sees modern play, as a matter of fact. This card is incredibly good. Yes. One of the biggest things that is really good about Effect Veiler is that since it was printed in older Yu-Gi-Oh!, it doesn't have a once per turn clause. So if you open multiple copies, you can actually deploy them both in the same turn. Later on, there are versions of this card that are similar, but have once per turn restrictions on them, which make them a lot worse. So typically, Veiler is like one of the better cards, if not the second best card, I want to say, at doing this type of effect. And when it was released, typically this type of effect negation was relegated to like trap cards specifically. There was never really a way to like have a hand trap that negated a monster effect. This card was quite expensive on release. It was like $50, $60, if you can believe that. And It has a lot else going for it as well. Being a tuner, that's something that you learned about last episode, means that if you don't want to use it for effect negation, you could use it to perform a synchro summon and convert a monster into a bigger monster as well. Now, I will say...
That's what that was.
I will say 99% of the time, you are not using Effect Veiler for that purpose. It's just added utility that the card has. It also being a light attribute was very good for it as well, because that's, like I said, kind of like the second best attribute in the game. Just overall, just a fantastic, solid card. But you were correct. It has never been restricted. This card is perfectly fine being legal at 3.
That might be the absolute slowest roll you've done so far. And I hate you for it. I want you to know. I want you to know. Who do I file a complaint to for abuse on YouTube? YouTube trust and safety? Is this what you're for?
I'll flag the video appropriately. Thank
you. I feel like I require it. Oh my God. Dude, that was mean. That was the next level there. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. Dude, what's going on?
Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh!
What anime waifu is going on here? What is this? Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, level 3, 0 attack, 1800 defense, zombie tuner. During either player's turn, if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can discard this card, reveal 1 card in your extra deck, then look at your opponent's extra deck. Also banish all cards in their extra deck with the same name as that revealed card. Only use this effect of Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries once per turn. During either player's turn, if your opponent controls more monsters than you do. So you have to... Okay, this has to be in your hand. You can discard this card, reveal 1 card in your extra deck, look at opponent's extra deck, banish all cards in their extra deck with the same name as revealed card. They have to have more monsters than you. But okay, help me out with how the whole tuner synchro summon thing works. I know they have to have, like, it's 2 things on the field, right?
Right, 2 or more monsters, and then the levels have to align. And you need a tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters. So then if you add up the levels and it equals that of a synchro monster in your extra deck, you send those to the graveyard and you bring out your synchro monster.
So this is where we get into timing. So if the opponent puts down the 2, let's say they put down the 2 tuner things.
Okay.
And you have a good idea of what they're going to go get because of what their deck and meta does. In Magic, there wouldn't be what's called the priority window. In Magic, you would be like, and I'm going to put my Synchro Summon on the stack and put these things in the graveyard, and you'd never get a chance to play this. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, how does it work?
So after your opponent plays the second piece, let's say they had 1 piece already out. They play the second piece. After they play that second piece, you would have a window in order to use Ghost Reaper, if you have an idea of what they're going to play, to get rid of that card out of their extra deck. Yes.
So this card's role, assuming this is a very unique effect, would you say this is a unique effect upon release?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so its role is to kind of metagame the metagame. Its role is to take the thing out of their extra deck so that they can't synchro summon it.
Right, or any other summoning mechanics, which we haven't gotten into yet. But yes, synchro summoning and fusion summoning would be the 2 that you've only known at this point.
Banish all cards with the same name. So you can put 1 thing in your... You could put like 1 thing in your deck, and if they put 3 in their extra deck because it was something they wanted to do over and over, you could just get all of it and just upend their strategy. Just tear it right out of them. Just give them nothing. That's cool. It's a tuner itself too. So like, what were you trying to get the stats to add up to? The levels, right?
Correct. The levels have to equal whatever you want them to equal.
So yeah, if your opponent's doing tunery stuff and you get them with Ghost Reaper, haha. And then if you're doing tunery stuff on your turn, like, and they didn't do tunery stuff, you play this, you play another tuner, and you go and do your synchro summon. Oh, that's fun. You probably just stare at your opponent being like, do I have Ghost Reaper? Do you have Ghost Reaper? Do I have Ghost Reaper? Do you have Ghost Reaper? Who wants to try to tune something first? That's fun. That's good. I mean, I think it's a cool card. It is a cool card. I like the approach to counter play to your own mechanics. That's something card games that stick around usually do well in some ways. So the question is going to be like, is it good? Probably depends on meta, but I'm guessing there are points where this is good. Is it restricted? That is different. because this is a safety. Like feels like it was built as a safety valve to like stop that which might be too busted. And in card game design, the safety valves rarely get banned unless they're too annoying. So was this so good that people were just like, we're not going to bother with synchro summoning and disregarded a whole set? Unlikely. That seems unlikely because this is too reactive, right? A good amount of time, like your synchro summon is going to work. Your deck is going to do the thing. I don't know, man. This doesn't seem for the entirety. Will they tolerate it, right?
Yep.
Maybe it gets restricted because the anti version was too strong and they thought it was good now and then. Is this better restricted than unrestricted? Because, like, yeah, maybe you're just playing like 3 of this tuner all the time while the tuner strategy is popular. And maybe that does make tuning so unreliable, people just move away from it, which does make all your new cards bad.
For context, there are 2 other summoning mechanics in the extra deck you have not seen yet. So there is not just synchros and fusions.
There's more extra deck stuff.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a lot of interaction with extra deck for a number of other reasons as well. But I'm thinking like when this, I guess, you know what? It's possible that when this first came out and they were like, yeah, it does the job. And then later they were doing more stuff with other stuff in extra deck. And this was just destroying that. And they're like, well, it's hard to sell you extra deck cards, which was the point of our extra deck to begin with.
Sure.
So money. Let's think like a business. Money.
Now you're starting to think like a Yu-Gi-Oh player.
Yeah. Were you taking money away? This also seems like a card people get really shiny versions of.
No comment. No comment.
Part of me says this card is fine. Okay. Like it's a specific effect for a specific meta. It goes after the right people is something a game designer, Patrick Sullivan, whose stuff I watch, like he would say this goes after the right people.
Okay.
And those kind of cards in Magic have almost never been restricted or banned. But
that logic hasn't been helping you in this video, for record.
It has not been helping me in this video. And the money when you think about the money, do you think about the money of this hosing like some cool extra deck stuff? I can also, yeah, man, I don't know. This one I could go either way. I will not be surprised either way. I'm gonna take a shot at like the money angle. I'm going to say at some point this got restricted for a period of time. Yeah. So I think it's a fine card that got restricted and it was a conspiracy.
Man, you should have went with your gut because Ghost Reaper is totally fine. Everything you said about it was basically on the money. One of the biggest issues with Ghost Reaper...
Except the money argument. Thank you. True. I appreciate that. Dagger.
The biggest issue with Ghost Reaper is that it's twofold, right? So the thing is, like, if you're looking at a specific metagame and there's a couple decks that everyone is playing, you can play Ghost Reaper and have those cards in your extra deck because maybe your deck doesn't rely on the extra deck as much. Or you have a couple slots to, you know, put those Ghost Reaper targets in your extra deck and just hose the opponent. And that's great. Mirror matches is another great example. If there's like one deck that is like definitively the best deck, in theory, if it's extra deck reliant, Reaper could be really good. The problem is that Reaper, if you don't Reaper them like immediately, like within the first turn or 2 of the game, if you draw this card later, it is like one of the worst draws imaginable because they've probably already like used it, or they've already probably gone into whatever it is they're trying to summon anyway. So the downside of this card is really, really bad. But I won't say that this card like hasn't been able to win games because sometimes a lot of strategies, especially during this era, were centralized around like one key combo card that was in the extra deck. And if you Ghost Reaper that card, that deck could like not function at all.
Yeah.
So
do you ever get people to just scoop? They're just done. You show them Ghost Reaper and they just scoop up and go to the next game. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's a very like potentially silver bullet card, but it's very high variance. And so I think cards like that are okay to exist in the game because it's like, yeah, there might be the 10% of times that like it works and it's great, but I think 90% of the time you're looking at this and you're like, why am I playing this card? On paper, it seemed a lot better in people's eyes, and then in practice, people realize this card is not very good. I will say it's made its way to plenty of top cut decks. Like it's been played and it's good under the right circumstances, but a lot of the times the general consensus is you would just want to play better cards. It's most of the time just not worth it to play this. But it is contextual. It is contextual.
Yeah, like I said, I could see it going either way.
Sure.
I get it. It's cool.
Okay. Let's stick with our lovely ghost girls here. That's what this little archetype of cards is called. So here's your next one.
Oh, yay. Ghost girls. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Level 3 fire. What? You have a fire? You have fire stuff? Okay. Attack 0, defense 1800, zombie tuner effect. When a card or effect is activated that includes any of these effects, quick effect, you can discard this card to negate the effect. Add a card from the deck to hand, special summon from the deck, send a card from deck to graveyard. You can use this effect of Ash Blossom Joy Spring once per turn. Okay. All right. Yep. Another one of these can interact for 0 kind of dorks. Nice. And again, probably going after the right people. If they're doing stuff where they like search their deck to get a card, normally that could just be game over with the right combination of stuff. And this prevents that. Special summon from the deck. Probably really good based on things we've seen before at this era. When these cards arrive, maybe it's on the way, not out, but maybe not the same, but still probably good to stop that sometimes. Probably very good. Send a card from deck to graveyard, like entombing in Magic speak. So it says a card. What if it's like a bunch of cards?
What do you mean?
I don't know. If you're like somehow milling your deck, like we've had some cards that do that, right? Like to flip your deck over and put like a bunch of cards in your graveyard.
It would negate the whole effect. So if there's a card that says like mill 5 cards, it prevents those 5 cards from being milled. Yeah.
Yay! Okay, it works the way we want it to. Yeah. So again, against some of that turbo stuff, we'll call it turbo stuff. Like it goes after the right people. Looking at these, the one I worry about is the special summon, but we learned in previous, like, if I saw this without doing the previous videos, I'd be like, oh man, take away people's special summon. They might not like that. They work so hard for those. And now I've seen from the previous videos, I'm like, special summoning's not that special.
Yeah, it's a very deceptive term that they decided to use there as Yu-Gi-Oh! Has aged.
Yeah, you stop one special summon, they'll probably do like 4 more.
They really should flip the terms. Normal summon should be special summon, and special summon should be normal summon, but it is what it is.
So, like, I'm looking at this, and this is all fine. It's probably, like, these are things that you'd want to stop sometimes to keep combos from happening. So, the part I don't have good... The part I'm not sure about is whether or not you even want to, like, have a level 3 fire thingy. Because it's the first fire one I've seen. And, like, on its own, is this just a terrible card to have in your hand? I guess if you're trying to tune it into cool stuff, like we talked about the tuners having that modality to them, but that wasn't good enough for the last card.
I will say, I will help you out with that. You're not evaluating this based on, like, the tuner part is like an extra, but it's not, like, it is like a 0.5% reason you play this card. I will just say that.
Yeah.
It's like a nice bonus, but it could honestly not say that, and that would not affect your evaluation of this card, just to help you out a bit.
All right. Looking straight at the card, then, I'm like, this is fine. It goes after the right people, and it's probably not that great on its own. So when you have it in a matchup where it doesn't do things, like, the downside is, like, similar to the previous cards, that you just don't have a great card. And then I get into the meta. Because, dude, would you really show me 2 of those with the same answer in a row? It's way more you to show me a card that's fine that I'll probably get all excited about, then show me a similar card and get me to say, it's kind of the same thing. And you're like, haha, that's busted. This is why you don't know things. That's what you're likely to do. So, but I can't get past it. Like, I think that this, I still think goes after the right people, because if they're trying to do things where they tutor their deck for a very specific card to pull off a combo, then you want some way to interact with that. If they're using a special summon that could just absolutely wreck you, you want something that interacts with that. And if they send a card from the deck to the graveyard, you want something that interacts with that. This card is like those modes. I can see 2 or 3 of them being so common that you would use a bunch of these in your deck. But is that a bad thing? It doesn't seem like a bad thing to me. It seems like a good thing because I like longer games and I like counterplay. But did people feel oppressed by this card? Did it shut down their whole degenerate combo? Maybe that's how it got restricted. But for me, similar evaluation to the last card, hits the right things and has the cost of when it's not good and you're just getting face planted by monsters, then it's a terrible draw. So I'm going to stick with how the video's been going and say this card wasn't restricted.
Final answer?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you for the thumbnail. This card is fucking crazy. Okay, this is going to teach you a lot about Yu-Gi-Oh! If you haven't already learned. Ash Blossom is nuts. For context, when this card came out, everyone was losing their minds. I think this card can probably hit somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20% of the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Card pool. That's like how ubiquitous these types of effects are. And when people saw this, they lost their minds. This card was like $100+ on release because it just stops so many things. Like, I cannot begin to just tell you how strong of an effect this card is. If there's anything you're going to learn from this card, it's that every deck in Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially modern Yu-Gi-Oh! As the game has aged, even old Yu-Gi-Oh!, to be honest with you, has the ability to add cards from deck to hand. That includes cards that do draw you cards, by the way. Special summoning from the deck and sending cards from deck to graveyard. I would say the third one is probably the least used, but the first 2 are good. If it didn't even have the third part, I think this card would still be as good as it is. Still sees modern play. Hasn't always been like a 3 of in every single deck. It really depends on the format and the way that the decks are. This card is batshit crazy and is perfectly fine at 3. You got it, CGB. You got it.
I knew it. See, when you start monologuing without just, yeah, I know. Yeah, I knew I got it. Yeah, it's fine. Hits the right people, right? It makes the game actually have to get played instead of durdle.
It's not even that it hits the right people. It hits everyone. The thing is, it's like most of the time.
You're all degenerate.
Yes, most of the time, you would be hard-pressed to find a deck that does not have cards that Ash Blossom can take care of. Like, it would be, like, impossible to find. Like, honestly, it'd be like those trap-based control decks that Ash is probably not even that good against. But even then, those decks typically have access to unique draw power or like I said, the amount of cards that this one individual card covers is insane. It is absolutely crazy how good this card is. So keep that in mind as we progress forward here. All right, only a couple left. Here's your next one.
So I can say if it gets stopped by Ash Blossom, then it probably is fine.
I wouldn't say that. So one thing that you need to learn about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that just because a card exists to counter it doesn't mean that card is healthy for the game. So that is definitely a philosophy they take when it comes to bans and limitations, I would say.
Nibiru, the primal being?
Nibiru, whatever.
The primal being. Oh my goodness. What the? I can't count this high. Is that level 11?
It's 11, yeah.
11. Light. Attack 3,000, defense 600.
You're going to love
rock. I love it already. It's a rock. During the main phase, if your opponent normal or special summoned 5 or more. What? Okay. You contribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible. If you do, special summon this card from your hand, then special summon 1 primal being token with stats to your opponent's field. This token's attack defense become the combined original attack defense of the tributed monsters. You can only use this effect of the primal being once per turn.
What do you think of board wipes in Yu-Gi-Oh?
What? No, wait, what? You can... Okay, hold on. During your main phase,
the main phase, that counts your opponents.
The main phase. If your opponent normal or special summon 5 or more things, you tribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible. That includes theirs.
Correct. Okay. All monsters.
If you do, summon this from my hand and then summon 1 primal being token to your opponent's field, the token's attack defense become the combined attack defense of the tributed monsters. Don't they get something bigger?
Potentially.
Potentially. Dude, they summon 5 things.
Well, remember, with fusion summoning, synchro summoning, and other summoning mechanics, you're taking 2 things and putting them into 1, right? So sometimes you're consolidating cards. So you're not, if there's 5 things on the field, that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to have, I'm sorry, it doesn't mean that they need to have 5 things on the field in order for Nibiru to be activated. So hypothetically, let me just give you a quick example. Let's say you play special summon guy, special summon guy. That's 2 summons. Synchro summon into guy, that's your 3rd summon. Maybe you special summon a 4th guy somehow, and then you synchro summon those 2 things into a 5th guy. That's 5 summons, but you only have 1 monster on the field. That's just...
Is that a thing people do all the time?
Oh boy, this is oh man. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. We'll talk about it later.
That just sounds like mad scientist nonsense.
Remember when you talked about Yu-Gi-Oh! 2?
Christmas land.
Remember when you talked about Yu-Gi-Oh! 2? That might be the best way to think about it.
Sure. Okay, we got a little preview. Okay.
Or I'm just bluffing you this whole time. I could just be messing with you.
You said the last card would teach me a lot about Yu-Gi-Oh! If this card is playable, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is nuts. What? Are you kidding? Like, this card would be so useless in most card games. Special summoned 5 or more monsters.
Remember, Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything's free.
Situational nonsense.
Everything's
what
free.
This would be.
Everything's free.
Oh,
or
God.
is it situational nonsense? Am I just showing you this to bait you?
I'm supposed to know,
this
but I
card could
don't.
be bad. That is an option.
Well, it doesn't have to be bad. It just has to not be restricted.
That's a difference.
Yeah. Special summon this card from your hand and summon. And then they get a token. So the balancing mechanism is they get something around what, like, they got rid of. And if they are on a turn where they're allowed to attack, that token can attack, right? Unless the battle phase already happened.
I will give you help here. You can special summon the token to their side of the field in defense position. So they would not be able to attack with it that turn.
And then on your turn, you have a 3,000 attacker, assuming this lives the rest of the turn.
Correct.
You have a 3,000 attacker, and they have a defense position rock, and you might be able to deal with that a few ways. Summon another thing, punch the rock, punch face for 3,000. I mean, I guess I'm getting closer to seeing how this could be good.
Okay.
Oh God! Did they have to restrict this card? What? I'm sorry. Is it hosing our whole fun time of just sitting there dorking our crap together? Was getting your master class monster from the extra deck that you fusion summoned like 16 little tentacles for turned into a rock? Was that ruining your Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience? Were you unhappy that all your work didn't pay off? Did we have to restrict this? I can't believe that. I can't see it. Okay. If the meta is like that, if both games are like that, I can see how having this is a blowout and annoying and makes you play in a certain way, but isn't that similar to other cards we've seen? Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that a good thing that you actually have to work for it, that you don't just play mindless solitaire, that somebody can gotcha despite all of your masterful like solitaire planning? I think that that's still a good thing. But I'm a control player. You know me. I want games to have interaction and take longer.
I was going to say, Nibiru is your kind of card.
I love this. I love that somebody who can go over there and dirtle for 5 minutes can then get got by this. I think that's great. It have to be restricted because in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's too good. Because every deck could run 3 of these, right? It's light. I guess it's light. Light is not doing bad. It's the second most played thing, according to you, that I learned in this video. I shouldn't discount light. Oh, God, don't tell me they had to restrict this. I think this card is sweet. And I also think, again, maybe you just stop. Maybe you go for 4 and say, wow, if I go for 5, I'm going to get blown out and I'm already ahead because I did 4 things. So I'm going to chill. Like, I feel like this is a card that its own mystique, its own gravity, like would get it somehow. I think that's good for a meta. I like meta like that. I do. I'm going to say not restricted. Let the rocks fall, baby. Let's do it.
And fall they did, because you are correct. Nibiru is perfectly fine. This card is a lot of fun. The rock is great. So it actually plays out exactly like you said. A lot of people, when they're playing, if they have like a more special summon heavy strategy, they have to consider, if they go to 5 summons unprotected, that this card could come down at any moment and completely hose them. There are some decks and archetypes in the game that they just call them like Nibiru decks, that they just like, they can do all these crazy things, but they lose to Nibiru. And yeah, it's an interesting story with this card, actually. Typically how cards are designed is that they're designed in Japan, and then they eventually get released in Japan, and then they finally come over to the States and the other non-Asian territories a few months later. So we're usually a couple sets behind the Asian territories most of the time. Nibiru was actually a TCG exclusive. So this was actually a card that we received in the non-Asian territories first before the Asian territories received it. They designed a couple of these cards that were meant to help people go second against like very aggressive decks. And so these were like almost custom made cards by our side of the game that were released into the game. And Nib is one of the ones that's had one of the longest lasting legacies just because of how impactful it is. It's a crazy fun card. When you get hosed by it, you never forget it, because man, when you get the rock dropped on you, it sucks. But when you're the one dropping rocks, baby, oh man, it's so much fun. Such a great card. Similar to like Gorz, its shadow looms very large over any time playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Now. You could bluff pretending to count their summons if you don't have Nibiru, if you want to pretend like you do. There's a lot of nonsense you could do with this card. And psychologically, the damage is there. Fantastic card. Very well-designed card. People love Nib.
Good. People have some taste. It's good to know that it's not just mono degeneration.
That they do. All right, couple more. This one is going to be interesting, because this, I'm going to have to help you out with a bit here.
Is this okay? Like, can we have this on YouTube? Dominus Impulse. I see some. there's some gal. There's some big dragon. I don't know, man. This is worrying. This is concerning. It's a trap card. Sure, it's a trap card. If your opponent controls a card, seems like a reasonable expectation, you can activate this card from your hand. When a card or effect is activated that includes an effect that summons a monster, negate that effect. Then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card. Oh, destroy the card that you negated the effect of.
Correct.
If you activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects, earth or wind monsters for the rest of this duel. You can only activate one Dominus Impulse per turn.
So to help you out a bit here, I know we've been calling these hand traps throughout the entire episode, but they have released a handful of cards that, funny enough, are trap cards that you can deploy from the hand under the right conditions. Dominus Impulse is one that says as long as your opponent controls a card, you can activate this from your hand. And so these are still what we consider to be hand traps. The only difference is they are trap cards instead of monsters.
This is... okay, it isn't a specific type of trap, so it can be in any deck, but it says light, earth, and wind monsters, so that restricts the kind of decks it goes in quite a bit, I would say. If you activated this from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of these things for the rest of this duel. That's crazy. So what are the other types?
There's 6 total. The other types are dark, fire, and water. Technically, there's a 7th, but it's the Egyptian gods. They're divine, but there's only 3 of them, so we don't count that.
Well, dark is really popular. We know that part. I'm guessing that there were things in those types that they didn't want combined with this somehow. It seems really weird. Maybe it's a cycle, or maybe it's more common than I know of, but it seems really weird to have a card that just tells you you can't do this stuff. Like, I don't know. This is the first thing I've seen like this. How much of a drawback is that? It's a good reason to play different classes, that's for sure. Assuming this is good. Seems really good. All you need is your opponent to control a card. They do the thing. They special summons. I mean, obviously, special summoning happens all the time. Everybody special summons. I think we've established that. Negate the effect and destroy the monster. Counter/removal in a deck that doesn't run light, earth, or wind.
Correct.
But it can hit anything that special summons. It seems good. Like, it's restricted in what decks it goes in, but that can also be an unhealthy thing if it steers everybody to certain decks, and then nobody's ever going to play a light, earth, or wind monster for the rest of the existence of the game if this is the best removal available, you know? Like, best counter/removal available. It feels like the question on this card that I'm going back to is like, do the other classes have options like this? Because if this is too good, like if this is by far the best option, then it does encourage you to just never play half the game, which is like, in Magic, they did that back in the day. Color hosing was popular. They had cards that were like designed to be one color's answer to another color and just shut that color out of Magic. Like if they had this, oh, that color does nothing anymore. It's over. And they did that back in the day. And they learned that ain't good. That ain't fun. People don't like that. Like, why would you take a whole slices of the color pie away, especially if one color got access to the best of these, you know, and that color was already good. So I don't know, man. There's context to this I don't have. The question is it good? Yeah, it's good. I bet it got played. First, feels like that would get played. Is it restricted? It's just counter/removal.
Yeah, it's just counter/removal.
The problem with it is it the best counter/removal? I don't know. Those color hosing cards, they stopped printing them because the gameplay wasn't great, but they didn't ban them ever. I mean, I know we're talking about Eternal formats, but those cards are still legal in Eternal formats and don't see that much play because everybody has answers to different situations at better rates, and you can play cards that are more flexible and don't just hose one thing. This is super flexible. It just encourages you not to play other things. You could also still play those things and just make this the last thing you play, and then you're going to win the game when you just punch them.
It also only restricts you if you activate it from the hand. You could still set it face down like a normal trap card and still use it.
So it's not like it's unplayable. It just encourages a certain play pattern that is negative to a certain class. And if you are going to go heavily into that class, you can probably play other options. I don't think this is probably good, but not restricted. I'll go with this. Yeah, I'll go with that.
And you would
Final
be
answer.
Correct, CGB. This card actually just recently got released at the time of recording this video. This card is relatively new. And that'd be one reason they didn't hit it, because it might be too new. But I really like this type of design. I like the fact that we're going this direction where, like, you can't do X for the rest of the duel, because it really forces you to play this in certain decks that are only taking advantage of 3 different attributes, hypothetically. Or you could just play it and hopefully, you know, if your deck does have, like, some, like, 1 or 2 components that are of that attribute, like, maybe you just then decide, okay, well, I just don't go to those options, because that could happen too. But this is a phenomenal card. Very just, like, overall, just, it's great. It doesn't see play in every single deck, but if your deck can support it, and if the meta is, you know, correct, this card is going to see play. It has already seen play. It's seen a lot of play. It's a very, very strong card. Ash Blossom had the ability to negate special summonings from the deck. This card negates any sort of special summon from anywhere. And as you've learned, special summon is not particularly special. So this card hits quite a lot. And it kind of sucks when you use it against a monster that's special summoning, because you're most likely not going to have a trap card in graveyard on the first turn. So they're still going to have that monster. But if they activate a spell card, let's say, they now control a card. You can impulse it, and now you're going to go 1-for-1 essentially with that, and you slowed them down. So as you can see, when you combine a lot of these different hand traps together, especially on the very first turn of the game, there's a lot of different ways, and we haven't even gone through all of them, not even close. There's a lot of ways to really interact with your opponent to slow them down and bring the game to a much more favorable pace for you, if that's what you're looking to do. But good. Good. Last one.
Do people want it restricted?
I wouldn't say so. I think it's like,
okay.
It's like, again, I think that the huge downside of it is just the fact that only certain decks can play it, right? It just so happens that right now, like, the best decks in the game are Dark, Fire, and Water, but that's just kind of the way that the game has played out. So it's a way that the decks that don't care about that have the option to play this. And honestly, sometimes even those decks will play this card just because it's that good in some instances. But it depends on the context of everything going on with the deck. There's way too much I could get into with it. But in any case, last card. This card might sound familiar to you, and that's why I wanted to show it to you.
Mulcharmy Perulia? Doesn't sound familiar yet.
When you read the effect, it might sound a bit familiar.
What is that? Water, level 4, 100 attack, 600 defense, aqua effect. If you control no cards, you can discard this card. Apply these effects this turn. Each time your opponent normal or special summons a monster from hand, immediately draw 1 card. Once during this end phase, it's a little familiar. It's all coming back to me now. Once during this end phase, if the number of cards in your hand is more than the number of cards your opponent controls plus 6, you must randomly shuffle cards from your hand into the deck so that the number of in your hand equals number your opponent controls plus 6. You can only activate one other Mulcharmy monster effect the turn you activate this effect. Yeah, so we're seeing you can only do this once a turn, like guardrails being put on the card.
That's a modern Yu-Gi-Oh!
Introduction.
Yep.
So what was the name of the little bugger? You showed me the little bugger. What was its name?
Which one?
The one that drew the cards when the summons happened. Max C. Yeah, that little bugger. Yeah. So they're doing what they did in Magic 2. After so many years, you're like, that card that was too busted, but people played it. We're gonna give them the member berries. I remember Maxi. And you're gonna be like, oh wow, they printed Maxi again, but this one does this and that, and it's so great. Buy, sell packs. And you're just some of those turn out to be really good. Some of them turn out to be busted. Some of them turn out to be crap. So, it's like we've seen all of it in Magic. The new reprint that's even more busted than the original, and the new reprint that's just like the original but better, but still dog shit. It's unplayable, right? In the modern game, it's really funny to watch it, but it works. It sells packs. It gets hype going. People get excited. Absolutely. Look at this little face.
Look how cute it is.
Look at this thing. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Why do they try to make the most toxic cards cute now? Where did that trend start, and why is that I hate that. It's so obnoxious.
I love it. I love it because you see it and you're like, this is the most terrifying thing in our game. And it looks like this, right? Or like Max C. It's like you said, it's a dresser drawer, right?
Yeah. What's wrong with that? How could that be a problem? If you control, let's go back in. I've got the vibes. Let's go back.
It's your last one. Last chance to score points. Last chance to score points.
Yeah. The points. We gotta have some points.
Yep.
If you control no cards, you can discard this card and apply these effects this turn. You showed me a card earlier with this text. It was busted too.
A lot
controlling
different,
no cards. Yeah. Controlling no cards apparently not as hard. Also, like, you can do this on turn 1, right?
Correct.
So, and it might actually have a serious effect, unlike the other one, which if you did on turn 1, probably not when you do it. Each time your opponent normal or special summons a monster from hand, immediately draw 1 card. So special summoning happens a lot. So that seems really good. I love this text. This just gives you, like, this assumes you already know. You already know. You learned from Max C, right? You already know. You understand where this is going. It presumes that you can get to plus 6 cards on your opponent with this thing. That's crazy that you're already up 6 cards. But what it say? Yeah, that's nuts, dude. And then they're saying, well, if you got up 6, hold on, we're going to put some brakes on you. You're going to have to do a little shuffle, and you can only draw to the up 6, right? That's what I'm understanding here. I love that the safety wheels on this card is you're only up 6 fucking cards.
That's all. As a control player, you should love that. You should love that.
It sets a tone, man. It sets a tone for sure. So now I have to wonder, because we talked about Max C. It was good enough for the thumbnail. I have to go back and check my notes. I don't think I wrote down anywhere you being like, dude, you draw 50 cards from this, or 20 or whatever.
They
was
didn't.
the
Let's just say they didn't call it taking the Max C challenge for without reason.
So the idea that like you do your full special summoning cycle because they're only up 6 in Magic, if you pass to someone who's up 6, you're dead. It's over. It's not close. It's not fine. That is so busted already. If you told me that often enough this card got to up 6 that it needed breaks in that position, I'd say it already won the game.
Okay.
And I can't imagine Yu-Gi-Oh! Being that different because everything's free. Being up 6 cards has to be insane. Insane. So when I look at this, my first thought is, are they on crack? Like, what are they doing? Are these breaks even close to good enough? It doesn't seem like it to me. It seems like this is a fuck around and find out moment where they were like, can we do Max C with some breaks and it's fine? I don't think it's fine. This still sounds insanely busted to me. This sounds like it was legal for 10 minutes. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, like, you can feed them, but if you do all these special summons in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, you can break even or better. Maybe you can still just be too far ahead. But this sounds to me like up 6, or even if you go over up 6 and you do a shuffle, you're still up 6. I can't with this card. This card seems like run 3 of all the time. Special summoning, from what I've learned, this just seems, I can't. No, this card... if this isn't restricted, it's either because I really don't understand Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is fully possible, or because it's too new. This seems like they messed around, and I bet they found out.
So
this has to be restricted. This card has to be restricted. Come on, man.
Final answer?
Yeah.
This card's at 3. It's unlimited.
Okay. Does it see play?
Oh, 100% it sees play. So let me give you the context
like
here.
as a 3-0 in a lot of decks?
Let me give you the context.
Yeah, bring it. Let's go.
Max C, you're familiar. Max C, I'll give you a quick reminder, says anytime your opponent special summons, you draw a card. It doesn't specify where. It doesn't care if you control no cards. It's just anytime your opponent special summons, you get to draw a card. Completely busted, been banned forever. For some reason, it's legal in the OCG. We don't understand why, but whatever. So, it's exactly like you said. They wanted to find a way to bring Max C back into the game, but they did put a lot of guardrails on it, like you said. So first of which, you have to control no cards. This is maybe one of the biggest changes, and I think probably for the better for Max C, because the biggest issue a lot of people had with Max C is that on your first turn, you could set up, do whatever, and then when your opponent goes to play their turn, you would Max C them, and now they have no chance of cracking your board unless they draw a million cards, right? So that felt bad. So now with Purulia here, you're not actually allowed to do that because you have to control no cards to fire this. So ideally, and most often, you're going to be firing this on your opponent's turn 1 when you're going second, right? You don't control cards. It's a way to slow them down. That makes sense, right? Now, is that still fair? It's still fucking crazy. Don't get me wrong, because it's Max C. But the second part is that what they did with the Mulcharmies, I'm showing you the first one. There's 2 others, Fuwalos, and I forget the new one. But basically, they divided Max C into 3 separate zones. So Purulia is only special summoning from the hand, or normal summon as well. Fuwalos special summons, counts special summons from the deck. And then the third one, I believe, is Graveyard or Banish Pile, if I remember correctly. I don't think it's legal yet, so that's why I'm not legal for us here in the non-Asian territories. So that's why I don't remember exactly. But in any case, so they took Max C and divided it into 3 separate entities to, like, try to make it that it's like, okay, you can get some draws sometimes, but not off of, like, every single special summon. And then the third part of the effect is, as you said, yes, we called it the Max C challenge, and it is not uncommon that sometimes if the opponent took the Max C challenge that you would end 10, 15 cards over them, which means that you just won the game. You could just throw everything you have at your opponent and there's no chance. The only way you win the Max C challenge is if you decked your opponent out by making them draw their whole deck, which I will tell you was possible and did happen sometimes. So that was like the only people's like recourse if they were trying to take the Max C challenge. The problem is with the Max C challenge is that as more and more hand traps came into the game, the opponent would draw more ways to interact with the opponent and stop them from, you know, continuously going off trying to deck them out, right? So all the makings of trying to make a balanced Max C. So we have Perulia, which does stuff from the hand. There's Fuelos, which does the deck. And Perulia sees play. Fuelos sees play. In the OCG, they have Max C's still legal. So technically, in the OCG, they have like 9 Max C's technically at their disposal to stop the opponent from playing the game. They're cracked. And they're unlimited. And the reason for that is because they are too new. This card also is very new, relatively speaking. And I don't think it's been around long enough that from a business perspective, Konami can go about hitting it at all. I will say Perulia is only good against certain decks. I do think that second line of text where it says you can only hit stuff that normal or special summons from the hand does limit the potency of this card. Don't get me wrong, it's still cracked and busted, but it isn't as crazy as old Max C, because if there are decks that don't special summon from the hand, for instance, that's uncommon, but it's not impossible. Maybe they primarily special summon from the deck. Well, maybe Fuelos is better against those decks, right? And vice versa. So having it divided is sort of a balancing mechanism in a way that you're not seeing every deck immediately play 3 of this, like in the main deck 100% of the time. Sometimes they sideboard it for specific decks that do special summon from the hand versus the deck. Same thing with Fuelos, vice versa, things like that. But it's very funny that, like, Max C is back, and there's, like, 6 to 9 of them, depending on where you're at. So, yeah, that is the history of this card. I thought it'd be very fun to show you, because you already saw Max C. So what do you think?
I think I was right.
You were right. You were right.
And I think it's really...
Wait, no, you weren't. You were wrong. You said it was restricted.
But you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean. Yeah. I think I hit it right on the head. It's only fine because it's new. I think it's hilarious that they're like, hey, how do we get like a lot of this effect?
Oh, and they have made so much money. These cards were so expensive because they make them the highest rarity, so they're like $100+. You need 3 of them. God, it's miserable. It sucks,
dude. Yeah, infinite money glitch.
Yep,
they found it.
Legal money printer. Legal money printers.
And you guys will buy it every
will.
time. I know you.
100%.
Yes, you will.
Cardboard crack hits hard.
Time.
It hits hard. It hits hard. So what do you think of hand traps, CGB?
I think the ones that draw cards are good.
I would imagine so.
I think honestly, it's like the 2 things I love most in Magic for the most part, which is like shutting down the opponent and drawing cards. So this is my jam. I enjoyed this one a lot. Yeah,
you can see we have a lot of interaction even on turn 0. So it's like as the game has aged, we've just gotten more and more of these cards. We didn't even scratch the surface, to be honest. I kind of hand-picked a few of the highlights, but there's probably at least 5 times as many of these types of cards. And it's cool because in deck building and across Yu-Gi-Oh's history, they've all come and gone in some way or another. And it's fun to have that interaction, even on the very first turn of the game. And sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh may only go a couple turns, but there's a lot of interaction happening within those few turns. And I think that's something that people don't realize within the whole meme of like, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh, only lasts like 2 or 3 turns. There's a lot happening.
All right, honest question. When somebody like has the soul read, and they think like, say they're about to do their 5th special summon and they don't want to get hit by the rock, right? Okay. Do they like look right at the opponent and say, I can see your hand trap. I can see your hand trap.
No.
Because I would.
If you start playing Yu-Gi-Oh.
I would do that every time I would do that.
So guys, that's going to wrap it up for another video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Let's go ahead and shout the patrons for all of their continued support. So shoutouts to Shadow1317, Tim00x3, MBT Play Medolce, Moto, Cameron L. Smith, The Synchro Guy, Pony Stark, Dan the Man Hoban, Little Fadeleaf, Draconic, Dylan Rare Hunter, JW11860, Brian Dancer of Class 7, Flannel Daddy, Twinkle Muncher, literally all of the guinea pigs, Cheeks McLapperty, Stolfin Amethyst, MBT Cancel Bio Community soon, Cancel Bio Committee soon, Cancel Bio Player soon, Wonder Waffle, Main Phase 2 Synchro on that thing, Daniel Howell, Life Keeps Using Solemn Judgment on My Hopes and Dreams, and Naveed Mandavi. Thank you so much again for watching, and